Thank you so much for being here, for all taking the time to fly out here and make sure to be part of this conversation. And you're all representing, I think, some actually quite different experiences of what has happened post October 7th. So let's get right into it. October 7th seems to have drawn sort of a line in the sand or maybe a line in the concrete, depending how you look at it, of the before and after of Jewish communities who have undergone significant upheaval from just fear, day-to-day fear, to kind of questioning their identity and their places in the countries that they've always lived, that they were born and raised. So I'd like to just start hearing from each of you your experience of post-October 7th in your own community, in your own country. Richard, maybe we'll start with you, and feel free to move your chair a little so you're not blinded by the spotlight.
Difficult not to be blinded, but I try. Well, how long do you allow me?
We'll have time to go back and forth with everyone. So I think, you know, a snapshot of kind of what you've seen, what you've experienced in France.
Well, first, if I want to define the situation in France, you have to understand that France now has the largest Jewish community in the diaspora besides the American community, which is much, much, much larger. France has about 400,000 to 500,000 Jews, and nobody knows exactly the numbers, and we are not allowed in France because of the secularity specificities to have census statistics about number of Jews, number of Muslims. The number of Muslims is also extremely large, probably 10 times the numbers of Jews in the French population, and this makes the Muslim population the largest one in Europe. France has been the focus of diverse terror attacks that killed Jews during these last 15 years, and I won't go inside them, but you probably know some of them, but this is the only country where there was a number of Jews that have been killed since the last years. And the degree of protection of the Jewish communities in France is very high. And this is one of the specificity of French situation. The position of the French government towards Israel can be summarized by the word en même temps, which is the motto of our president, President Emmanuel Macron. En même temps means at the same time. At the same time, the position of the authorities towards French Jewish community is very friendly. And at the same time, the position of the French authorities towards Israel is much less friendly. And besides being friendly towards French Jewish community, the French authorities are always very cautious not to challenge the Muslim community because they know that there might be some very some tragic reactions. With this framework, I would say that we knew that after the 7th of October there will be reactions, and by the way, this is the first time of history probably that when the community suffers for such a blow as the 7th of October, the reaction in the world are against this community and not for this community. There were some reactions. There were definitely some reaction towards the reaction of sympathy towards the Jews, but they were very quickly they're very quickly oversized by reactions of empathy for the Gaza population. Besides that, altogether, we did not have the same. We did have a large number of anti-Semitic actions and words, but we did not have large degree of public manifestation, public demonstrations, and we were appalled by what was going on in the United States. We were appalled by what was going on in Great Britain. I would like to hear about it. We did not have this kind of reactions. Just to end the situation in France, we know that the anti-Semitism now is basically the hate of Israel. We do have the old anti-Semitism of the extreme right. We know that this anti-Semitism is not a major issue now. The anti-Semitism, the hate of Israel, is the basic problem, and this comes from the Muslim population on one side and from the leftist parties who are just longing for electoral strengthening by the Muslim vote. And just to end up, our major issue now, I think, is the generational gap. That means we are used to, our generation is not used first to the ways that are, to the social networks that are used by the young generation, and the differences in feelings towards Israel and towards Gaza, towards the victims, are so different between the old generation and the new generation that this is a very of a large concern for the future in our country, as probably in the other countries.
That's certainly a crucial, very, very difficult battlefield that will be covered also in the following panel, the issue of social media and public discourse, which we all know is we cannot ignore to any degree. Richard, since you brought it up, let me jump to you, Paul, in terms of the UK. You were saying there were not so many demonstrations in France this time around. London was a different story. We've all seen the photos, kind of shocking video out of there. Give us a peek from the inside, not just what we're seeing, on CNN, what the experience has been like post-October 7th in your neck of the woods.
Well, let me be absolutely blunt. We, as the Jewish community and leadership in the UK, failed miserably to prevent, to work against, or to stand up for Jews over the last 20 years. I'm angry. I'm extremely angry. We all talk about Israel failing on every level militarily, but we as a community failed. For the last 20 years, Islamic fundamentalism has been weaponized in the UK and has been organized unbelievably well in military precision. And what have we done? We get up and we demonstrate and counter-demonstrate and complain during campaigns, but in between campaigns, we do nothing. We are complacent.
Constantly reacting versus...
Only reactive, and during and between campaigns, we do very little. The Jewish leadership in the UK, because it has disagreements with the Israeli government, felt that there is no necessity to stand up and defend Israel between campaigns, but only because of only to stand up against anti-Semitism and Jews. And to be fair, the Jewish leadership stands up against anti-Semitism very well in the UK. But when it comes to anti-Israel sentiment, it has failed miserably and has not realized that without standing up for Israel, it eventually spills over to the Jews. So we have failed. And unlike some of our politicians, I take responsibility for that failure as well, as I was one of the Jewish leaders during that time, head of the Zionist Federation. Where are we today? let me give a little bit of an overview of what the UK is. Let me start with a positive, not many, but let me start with a positive. The vast majority of the UK either don't care about Israel, but certainly do care about their Jewish minority. And we can see that during the election, the last election campaign, Jeremy Corbyn was swiftly exited on one of the worst election results Labour have ever received. And partially because of, and they were not happy with the anti-Semitism. But all those that were involved, that minority in the anti-Semite Labour left minority, were very happy to join up with Islamic fundamentalists. The education there is exactly as you see all around Israel, all around the terrorists. It's the same education. And they have an audience. They're a very loud minority. They have an audience, and they are typically quite militant, and they are combative, and they use mob mentality. They will use guerrilla marketing. You've seen, I'm not going to go through everything. You've all seen what happens in the UK. And they will use marketing. But we have friends in the UK. We have a huge amount of friends who have no truck or time for Islamic fundamentalists, do not want to see them marching every Saturday through London over the cenotaph, over war memorials, because that affects British history. They don't want to see it either. And for that reason, they dislike that element entirely. So we do have friends, but we need to stand up for ourselves. We can't expect everyone to stand up for us, the Jewish community, to sit back and say, Israel needs to defend us, the government needs to defend us, the other people need, everyone. No, we need to stand up for ourselves and do it. And there are ways and means of doing it, but we have failed miserably.
We're going to get to that in a moment about how do we do it, how do you actually set targets and goals to not be reactive, like you're saying. I think that's a really important point, not just waiting around and reacting, but actually being proactive, especially when, as you described, the Islamism and everything is kind of very well calculated, very well planned out. Before that, Johanna, I want to hear a little about your experience, both in Italy and perhaps beyond, because I know that you're exposed to many communities. Do you feel that there is a true before and after of October 7th?
Thank you, Nurit. First of all, allow me to thank my good friend Yaakov Agoel for putting together this very meaningful conference in the aftermath of the 7th of October. Last time we sat with Agoel at the conference was in Basel. Clearly, the world was a different place. The world for us Jews were a different place. But I think the world for Western civilization was a different place. So we've talked about September 11, that changed the life of many of us, of all of us. Well, October 7th did change the life of us Jews, as communities. I'm sitting, of course, in a panel of giant communities between France and the UK and the United States. I wear a number of hats, but clearly, I think this morning I'm going to be speaking on behalf of a much smaller community, the Italian Jewish community, which comprises of about 20,000 Jewish souls. The situation changed, I would say, dramatically for us since October 7th. When I was a teenager, and it was the time of the first Intifada, I remember, the Palestinian issue in Israel was very much in current events. And Israel was criticized dramatically for that. When Berlusconi came to power, the foreign policy towards Israel of Italy changed dramatically. And suddenly we found ourselves with a government which was very friendly towards Israel and started changing Italy's foreign policy towards Israel. In the last 10, 15 years, I have to say that in terms of anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism was defined as, I would say, they would make a distinction between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. There was a big distinction. So they criticized the governments here and there in Israel of the right, mostly, I would say, and anti-Semitism was really below the radar because it was, they were talking about anti-Semitism, but it was below the radar, and the Palestinian issues in the last 5-10 years was hardly discussed. Now, what happened in October the 7th? October the 7th, we have a totally situation that changed. Suddenly, these anti-Zionists came out as strong anti-Semites, and what we've defined always as the same side of two sides of the same coin suddenly came out clearly, and anti-Semitism came to the surface. Now, let me be very clear. The government in Italy today is very friendly toward Israel. We have a government of center-right, For the first time ever, by the way, we have a woman prime minister who leads a party of the right, and I could also say of the extreme right, and it's the first time ever for Italy. And the government is very friendly towards Israel. Where we have anti-Semitism today is strongly in the media, strongly in the academia, and we've seen in the last 4 months a number of demonstrations, a number of either public, on the streets, private, one-on-one towards Jews of anti-Semitism. We are blessed in Italy to have security. All of our Jewish sites, including schools and synagogues and restaurants and all the Jewish sites and organizations, are protected by the national security. They've doubled security since October 7th. So clearly one of the major issues of us communities, smaller communities, the diaspora communities, is an issue of security. And in that respect, in Italy, we are well covered. But to say that anti-Semitism came out, it changed dramatically, it did. Israel today is singled out. Words like genocide are coming to the surface. Israel is today being called a genocidal nation. Words that in the last 10 years were not even discussed. We have to start changing the rhetoric. We have to charge languages like occupied territories, genocide. These are words that need to change in the public opinion, and unfortunately they are not changing. They are being emphasized today, and this is where Israel stands in terms of Italian, not, as I said, not government, not institutions, academia, and the media.
That's an important distinction also, because you can't think of governments as representative really of the whole picture. It's one small slice of the picture, but of course what happens on the ground level is often that much more significant, especially universities, which we see one thing that everybody has in common, from the United States to France to the UK to Italy, that they're a hotbed of anti-Israel sentiment. Rabbi Cosgrove, New York, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's no city that's home to more Jews in the world than New York. But if we speak even about American Jews' bigger picture, my sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the post-October 7th period has been more of a shock to American Jews than to European Jews, because it was a different kind of sense of integration than many European Jewish communities have experienced. So what have you seen?
Thank you, Nurit, and it's nice to have 2 minutes to speak for all of American Jewry.
No problem.
And I have to say, like my colleague did, I'm struck by the fact that we're all here. Many of us saw each other a few years ago at the 120th in Basel, and I think to myself of Herzl's vision of a Jewish state, both as a place of Jewish self-determination and self-defense, but also as a place to normalize the condition and eliminate anti-Semitism worldwide. And I think if we were to have that conference today, it would be very different today. So I'm just struck by being here today. Yeah, look, I think that everything changed and nothing changed. Because I think that many of the issues that were on the table, whether it was the blurred line of anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, whether it was the question of diaspora-Israel relations, the question, these questions existed in some form prior to October 7th, but they came out in full relief on October 7th, and so you had this tremendous sense of whiplash that took place, because for an older generation, there was a sense of, I told you so. I had a young couple in my office getting ready for their wedding, and they said, my dad always used to tell me stories, and I never believed they were true. I thought they were just like stories from yesteryear, and now I think they're true. They don't like us very much. And so there's just this sort of sense of, I told you so, and in that sense, and I told you so mixed with, where did all this come from? Where did all this come from? And so I think right now, what you're saying, Nurit, the idea that we're getting a bit of a taste of the UK, of France, of a world that's inhospitable. Jews have always, in America, have always thought that we live comfortably in this sort of Jeffersonian democracy, that we can be, in a Brandeis way, ardent supporters of the Jewish state and proud Americans all at the same time, and there's no conflict between the two. And now we're kind of realizing that maybe it ain't so. And I think that's been part of the whiplash of this moment.
So let's talk, as practically as possible, though I think we need, days and days to talk about it, and we have about 10 minutes, so we'll do our best. But thinking about going forward, something that's been raised, and I think, Paul, that you mentioned as well, is, okay, so what do you do in the interim? What do you do now? What do you do differently? And Richard, I'm interested in your take on what are the actual goals? Because kind of like Tamil described, you're never going to defeat terrorism completely. I don't think anybody's under the illusion we're going to defeat anti-Semitism completely or anti-Israel sentiment, but you can do a lot. So what should the targets be? What should the goals be of action going forward?
Well, clearly we do not have to fight. There is no need to fight against those people whose life is geared against Israel, and we have to fight with those people who are goodwill people, but who are appalled by what is going on and who have just the compassion geared towards what is going on in Gaza with the Palestinian people. The majority of French population understands that when a country suffered such abominable actions as the 7th of October, it has to react. Majority of elderly people understand that. But those people also are in the idea that you can always discuss with your enemies and you can always find an agreement with those enemies. What these people don't understand is that the enemy is not a normal enemy. The enemy is a fanatical and a fanatical organization that is part of Islamism, and you do not discuss with Islamism as you discuss with people who just want to have a kind of agreement with around some territorial issues. This is not a territorial problem. The problem is summarized by the chart of the Hamas. And this is something that we have to teach to people because it is always put under the carpet. The chart of the Hamas is the basis of what is going on in the fight of Israel. If we don't understand that, if we don't fight against with this idea in mind, we will end up with interminable discussions about what is occupation and what should be done and the two-state solution. There is no two-state solution with an organization like the Hamas. So this is our major object. And question arises: why the academy? Why are they so much against Israel? Well, they were always. Well, there was the Marxists, the communists. The academy was the hot point of the Marxist theory. Besides, there is another thing that we haven't discussed yet because no one wants to discuss is the weight of the country like the Qatar and the money problem, the money that are involved because. We don't have to. We have to look at the things clearly. There is a lot of money that is involved by the Qatar towards the universities and so on. And we have to discuss these matters, but we have to discuss them in the face of those people of goodwill who just don't understand what the situation is about.
Paul, what do you think needs to change going forward? If we're talking about who do you target, who are you talking to? You're talking about, let's be active in between, hopefully, never again a horrific event like we saw October 7th, but when the ground is so wide, when the landscape is so problematic, where do you put your focus?
Well, we've mentioned the mistakes that we've made. Now let's implement solutions. Solutions are very simple. Number one, more resources, more coordination, and better funding. This needs to happen across the main hubs around the world. The US, I'm going to leave aside because that's an entirely different country, world in its own right. But the rest of Europe, the UK seems to be one of the main hubs. And the way we have dealt, we've found some success is number one, on the advocacy side of it, across the world, I think Jews are coming together, and there's some great organizations helping facilitate that. I'm not going to talk about that. But what we have found success is that we have one huge advantage in our favor, and we need to utilize it much, much better. And that is we have the law in our favor. There is laws across Europe against discrimination based on nationality. Israel and Israelis are a no-go in the UK. You cannot mention it. I can give you examples from now till forever, but let me tell you what we have done. So we set up many years ago as the Zionist Federation Lawyers for Israel. It's now become the UK Lawyers for Israel. It has moved on for the last 10 years. Jonathan and Caroline Turner, two barristers, have done a phenomenal work, and I sit on the board to try and facilitate. And what they do is they have a number of about 80 volunteer lawyers. And what they do is soft power. We don't need to take everyone to court, but it's soft legal power. Using the law, sending letters to every institution or every single organization that is about to be anti-Israel or against the Israelis, and we argue with them, and we have had phenomenal success. I can tell you now that 60 bank accounts have been closed. Palestinian-funded bank accounts have closed just because of the letters and the legal threats. And we know the law, and we can argue the law. And as soon as they read it, they get advice, and they back out from it. Those successes relate to our friends in Parliament and our friends in organizations who want to stand up for Israel and who want to support the Jews, can then turn to that without just being intimidated and saying, well, what are you standing up for Israel for? On a political level, he says, she says. That's not the argument here. They can clearly say, well, the law says this, so there we go, we support you. There was an incident where a student on campus did a thesis on Hamas and on Gaza, and because she wasn't critical of Israel, she was failed. This is her thesis. We managed to get compensation and an apology and her degree reinstated because of that. So I can show you in Ireland, a BDS bill was blocked because of anti-discrimination laws, and these are prevalent laws, human rights laws equality laws across the EU and in America. Now, we have also helped countries in South America who know us just because we know people, and in Chile we've helped work on this as well. My suggestion is, number one, the advocacy side and the social media, and I'm going to leave to those experts who can, once we have successes, can push those out and argue, and those arguments are crucial. But the thing that we do have the weapon is the law, and if we can replicate these small offices of legal departments across the world to fight it and draw a line in the sand against all those that want to eradicate everything that's named Israel, then I think we can do it to a certain extent.
So using the tools at our disposal, don't be afraid to use those concrete tools. And you mentioned money, of course. Money is behind terrorism. Qatar, as you mentioned, different conversation. But Johanna, what have been the conversations, within the Jewish Agency or beyond that on what it needs to be in focus now? Where are you turning to?
Okay, I think there's a big elephant in the room that we're not tackling, and my main concern is our own people. My main concern is our own students in universities, especially in places like North America, clearly, but throughout the world. When it's Jewish students define Israel as the colonizing power, this is very, very sad, and it's very wrong. We are an indigenous population resettling our own land. So if we don't teach history to our own students, if we don't give our own students the tools to do what you're exactly saying, on the legal aspect, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to go into legal aspect, but on all fronts, we need to give our own people the tools to be able to tell the real story. We have the facts. The question is that we need to be able to communicate them properly. And I think that I agree totally with Richard that the main challenge today is not within the old generation. The old generation, you have the people of the extreme left and the extreme right. They will always be against the Jews and against Israel. But the young generation today has zero knowledge of who we are, of our history, and why we are here. This is what we as a Jewish people, this is what we as a Jewish agency, as a World Zionist organization, should concentrate our efforts on, educating our own people.
Thanks very much, Johanna. A really important note. And Rabbi Cosgrove, let me just let you react, because I know you have something to say.
So I want to build on that, but I want to take it in a direction that wasn't your intent. Because I think we need to do everything. I think we need to do the legal. I think we need to do the media. I think we need to play offense. I think we need to play defense. I agree with everything. The money, everything. We got to do everything. But what should we not do? And what we should not do is pick people off from within the Jewish people. Right now, one of my greatest fears is that, as a verse in Isaiah says, that your enemies will come from within you. I have a far more generous view, not that it's not needs to be addressed through education, which it does, but if we want to win the long battle, we have to acknowledge that there is a plurality of voices within what we call the Jewish people. And I actually respectfully disagree with the opening remarks of this plenary. I think that there is a left and right. I think that there is a religious and non-religious. I think that there is a group in favor of judicial reform and against judicial reform. And you know what? All these people, they're my mishpacha. They're my family. And family is family, which means you listen, you ask probing questions. As the great American Rabbi Arthur Hertzberg once said, you can't affirm your own certainties without engaging in the counter-certainties of another. And I think it's only by proving to ourselves that we are capable of housing a plurality of voices will we be able to find the path forward.
Thanks so much. Yeah. I think I wish we had more time because I know you all have a lot more to say, and I encourage everyone to pick up those conversations in the break and ask the questions that you might still have on your mind that you can take then home to your communities. But I think that ending on that note of also looking from within and making sure that we aren't our own worst enemies and we aren't alienating Jews as Jews is really crucial. And just sort of a last note that comes to mind when I hear you all speak is that it seems that at this crossroads, there are two very kind of diametrically opposed directions. There's one where post-October 7th can lead to a quieting of diaspora Jewry, of people scaling back, of taking the kippah off, of hiding their Judaism, or on the flip side, an awakening of diaspora Jewry, a strengthening maybe from what you said, Rabbi Cosgrove, describing that young couple saying, oh, we suddenly woke up to this new reality. So let's hope that we can take a little bit of the advice from each of you, that it will be an awakening and not the other way around, and continue that conversation. Thank you all so much for being here.